This is Jim Martorano from All About Town. Grew up working for Robert Kennedy when he ran for president. I've been inspired by John Kennedy, his brother. And today I'm inspired by the district attorney I'm sitting next to, Mimi Rocah. She is a person who is just dedicated to doing the right thing, dedicating to social justice. And when I last talked to her, we were in the backyard, her backyard, and her dog was all over me, wonderful dog, and she was running for district attorney, and she was successful. So a lot of things have changed. It's 3 years later, and here we are kind of doing an update. And I present to you a person I admire and respect and just think she's the best, Mimi Rocah.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here with you. It really does seem like both a long time ago in settings. We've gone from the backyard to the formal and much more esteemed setting of the district attorney's office. And we are, if not over, much more through COVID, which was during that time. I remember we were social distancing, et cetera. And so, I've been here now for almost for 2+ years. And so have really already gotten a good set of accomplishments under our belt, which I'll be happy to talk with you about.
And that's right. I mean, I remember you had a very large agenda of things you wanted to accomplish. And, you always set out things you want to do, and maybe you don't always, because of budget or other reasons, you don't always get there. Can you fill us in on some of the things that changes that you've made in the DA's office that you're especially proud of, and maybe some more changes that are yet to come?
Sure. So one of the things I'm proud of is that a lot of the things I said I was going to do, we actually have been able to do. So, for example, something I talked a lot about during the campaign was setting up a conviction integrity or conviction review unit. Having, as I say often, I think that most, the majority of prosecutors and police officers and people in our justice system are in it for the right reasons and trying to do the right thing. But we have to have guardrails in place because we know that mistakes happen. And a conviction integrity unit is one of those sort of guardrails that we can have to make sure that we're getting it right. And if we're not getting it right, what kind of corrections can be made, what kind of remedy will there be, and to help set up policies so that going forward we make sure we're getting it right. So we did set up that unit. We hired 3 women who are professionals in exoneration work. They're amazing, and they've been at work, as professionals, taking on challenges, when cases are referred to us, looking at cases of both actual innocence and also cases involving police officers who were convicted of crimes in the past, who are no longer police officers, but whose body of casework needs to have an objective look. So that's one accomplishment that I talked a lot about as a goal, and we've really been able to achieve. And it's the first independent conviction review unit in Westchester. And I think is really kind of the hallmark of any modern prosecutor's office at this point. Not to have one is to not be in step with the times. I talked a lot about gun violence and gun safety, and I had done a lot of work with Moms Demand Action, just as a mom of school-age kids, as a Jewish woman, in this world today. You can't not think about guns and gun violence and what we can do to prevent it. So we've been very proactive since I got here. We have set up, first of all, just increased our relationships, our working relationships and partnerships with law enforcement, both across Westchester, at the federal level, at the state level, and into New York City to make sure that we're getting all of the necessary intelligence to do seizures of guns. And we've gotten hundreds of guns, literally, off the street in the past 2 years in these coordinated law enforcement operations. We set up the gun and gang task force with law enforcement at the federal and local level. and again, have been really successful in these coordinated law enforcement operations. At the same time that we're getting guns off the street, we want to work to make sure we're being proactive in preventing guns from getting into the hands of people who would do harm with them, who might do harm with them. And so we're really utilizing and have been very proactive on the outreach and education front about what's called red flag laws, or ERPOs. And that the number of those has gone from 10 in this county to well over 50 just in the past 2 years. And I think that's really and in the state overall, it's increased greatly because the types of people who can apply for ERPOs, it's not just law enforcement anymore. Now it's also healthcare providers, school officials. And so we really have a process in place now in terms of training law enforcement, training healthcare providers, training prosecutors in our office, training people in schools to make sure that when there are red flags, literally, we can apply to have the gun temporarily removed from a person who is showing signs that they would do harm to themselves or to others. And of course, that's all based on a court application and a court finding and a court order. We're also doing a lot of education on the safe storage law because most school shootings, for example, are done by young people who get access to guns either in their own home or in the home of someone they know. So having legal guns that are safely stored, that's important. It's not an anti-gun law, it's an carelessness with the gun.
Safety law.
Exactly. So we've done a lot of work with them on those two fronts in conjunction with Moms Demand Action and other groups that allow us to get outreach to the community, and with our law enforcement partners. They're quite supportive of this. The other area there are many, so I could go on forever about the things I'm most proud of, but the third area I would mention that was something I talked about during the campaign, I take a very victim-centered approach to things, having been my family has been the victim of violent crime, my parents on more than one occasion, and so I really do look at things through the eyes of victims. And so setting up our cold case bureau, which we'd never had before, it's been a big accomplishment. And we already have, there's over 100 cold cases in Westchester, and cold case, what it means is an unsolved homicide. And what that means is there's a family out there who not only has lost a loved one, but hasn't gotten the closure that can come with having that solved. And so that's really the motivation behind it. And it's why our prosecutors in our office and law enforcement across the county really love working on those cases, because they know that what they're fighting to do is solve something that will give closure to a family that hasn't gotten it. And we've been able to already successfully prosecute 5 cold case homicides just in these 2 years, and we have many more that we're working on. We have a new criminal investigator who's working with our prosecutors on it. He's a former NYPD detective with a great history, so I think we're going to be really successful on that going forward.
One of the things that I was with Legal Aid in the Bronx for 45 years, and I'm still practicing. One of the things I've always been concerned about is mental illness. And I've contacted, I'm in touch with a woman named Deborah Deno, who runs a group at Fordham Law School who looks at neuroscience, and it's called Neuroscience in the Law, really, Institute. And I'm very concerned about the number of clients I've had who are just mentally ill. And unfortunately, I go way back into the 70s practicing law. Unfortunately, we used to just throw them under the carpet. I mean, we never looked at that. They just got time. And now I think there's a new and renewed interest in looking at not just the crime, but looking beyond the crime, like you always talk about a balance, looking at perhaps the mental illness of the individual involved, and can something be done about that? I know in the Bronx they established a mental health court. It was very limited. I would say about 30% of my clients had mental issues, mental health challenges. And I think the criminal justice system, my own personal feeling is, needs to invest more time, effort, money, resources into looking at into that aspect of our business, you know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so we've done a lot in that area, and you're right, it is an investment. That's exactly how I look at it. So, you know, I do think there is a balance in terms of when cases happen where there is a crime of violence, a serious crime of violence. Unfortunately, both for the person who's impacted by that violence and the person who's committed that violence, because they probably are going to go to prison for a long time, that is too late, right? That is, we are at a point where, you know, we as prosecutors at that point really need to, I'm not saying you don't look at all at the person, you know, who committed the crime, you do, but you're really, at that point, you know, you're dealing likely with someone who's either been killed or hurt in some really horrible way, and that has to be taken into account in a aggressive prosecution, in a you know, intensive prosecution. So what you want to do is you want to try to get at the problem before someone reaches that point. And you know, anyone working in the criminal justice system as a defense attorney, as a prosecutor, as a judge, who over the years, that is what you see. By the time someone, and I'm not saying all violence is caused by mental health problems, because there's many different, but the ones that are caused or have a correlation with that, probably at some point earlier, had there been some different kind of intervention, maybe we could have prevented this. And it's not a surefire, you know, answer to everything, but even if it prevents someone from going down that path in a certain number of cases, we will have all, you know, done our jobs. So when I got here, there was a felony mental health court as well as a felony drug court, and those are both good. They were severely underutilized. In other words, people who could take advantage or could benefit from the resources for whatever various reasons, and it's been complicated, but we're trying to figure out the reasons why so underutilized, and we're trying to lower the barriers to entry and get more people who belong in those programs into those programs. So that's one part of it, as well as Veterans Court, which also deals with a lot of people with, you know, understandable trauma and mental health issues. And so we've really been working on just literally getting more people who are eligible into those programs to benefit from them. The other thing we did is we went to the court system essentially here in Westchester and said, what about a misdemeanor mental health court? Yeah. That's where we want to really, you know, address it when people are committing these lower level, often and usually nonviolent crimes. That's when we want to offer them the social services to try to get them the help that they need so they don't go down that path of committing felonies, especially violent felonies. And you know what? We have a partnership between us and legal aid and the 18B panel and the courts, and everyone was on board, and we now have a misdemeanor mental health court here in Westchester, which it just got up and running about a month ago.
And how do cases get referred to them, by the judge or by the DA?
Both. You know, we worked out a set of criteria of what cases, what types of crimes will be eligible, what criminal history categories, you know, past would allow you to be eligible or not eligible. And it is still case by case, but we have some broad categories which will be made public and transparent. You know, when a case comes in, the defense can ask for it. We can suggest it. I mean, it's really a team approach, and it's worked well in other areas like Veterans Court. So I'm very hopeful that this will end up it's really an investment in the person, in helping them, and in our long-term community safety. Because the idea is, you know, we've had just some horrific crimes happen. We had a horrible hate crime happen where a woman was, an elderly Asian woman was brutally beaten. And we prosecuted that to the fullest extent because that is what it warranted at that point. But, you know, there were signs of mental health issues by the person who was convicted of that. And, you know, it's not to fault anyone, but there just wasn't something in place where that was able to help him and get him out of that path that he was on. So that is one of the ways that we're trying to deal with it. We also have, even at a lower level, we have something called Fresh Start that we started, which is a pretrial diversion program. So what that means is it's for very low level misdemeanors and violations like trespass, loitering, some shoplifting, things like that. We're now starting to look to expand it into certain low-level drug crimes. But basically, it allows, it's crimes for which someone would otherwise get a desk appearance ticket.
Yes.
But instead of a desk appearance ticket, now they get the option to enroll in this Fresh Start program, get introduced to different social services, and if they do it and complete it successfully, they never have to appear in front of the judge. So they have no court record whatsoever. So the idea for that is these are low-level crimes, mostly first offenders, and people make mistakes, and we want to catch that person and give them a safety net when we can at that early phase, when it's a relatively low risk, high reward, low risk. And so Fresh Start, we started as a pilot program.
Who decides if the person's going to get a desk appearance ticket or?
So we have a we have a good list essentially of what crimes are eligible, what their background eligibility, and we have trained the police departments, all 42 of them across the county, because now it's countywide. And the police departments, I don't want to speak for all of them, but I would say just based on the success rate, most of them are quite enthusiastic about it. I think it gives an alternative for them instead of seeing this sort of DAT, okay, get out, then they might commit the same offense. It tries to break that cycle of recidivism.
That's exactly what I was talking about. Now, when we last saw each other, you were just starting out, and you were getting involved in the election, and then you were successful, and then you went. It's a change. You went from the federal system to the state system to Westchester County. What were the biggest surprises to you when you first started working here?
I think one is the volume. I mean, and in terms of the volume of cases proportionate to the number of prosecutors. And
What was that volume compared to?
I mean, the office here, so we're about 130 prosecutors here, about 230 total prosecutors plus staff. Prosecutors is about, I think, 150. Getting my numbers. No, 130, yeah, that's what I said originally.
130 prosecutors.
Right. But the volume of cases is, some of them are small cases, some of them are big cases, but each prosecutor has a high volume of cases compared to what a federal prosecutor has, but then the federal prosecutor tends to have, each case is a bigger case. So it's different, and here, because of the discovery obligations, that having a high volume plus the new discovery obligations, it does make it harder to ensure that we are being as victim-focused as I would want us to be, that we have enough, that's something I'm always thinking about. Are we making sure that our prosecutors are able to spend the time that they want to spend and that the victims deserve to have spent on each case, with each victim, with the families of victims. So when I got here, one of the first things I did was instituted a rule internally that someone in our office should reach out to the families of homicide victims within 24 hours. Because previously it was really the police department that was handling that at that stage. But I think it should be someone from the prosecutor's office as well. And so that's a rule from day one, and people have really been following that. It's a small thing, but it can mean a lot to the family. But that sort of leads into, because discovery here is more voluminous and there are stricter time requirements, we, like every DA's office, have been trying to figure out ways to deal with that, to make sure that we meet those demands of discovery and the requirements. And so we set up a discovery bureau, which did not exist. Yep. And it's been very successful. It's really been in the past year that we really got it off the ground with a bureau chief, and we hired and trained about 8 to 10 paralegals, and have really tried to make it part of the fabric of the office. It's a change. I think previously, before discovery reform, prosecutors here really did their own discovery.
That's right.
But we're trying to.
So if I'm a prosecutor in your office and I have a case, I can go to the Discovery Bureau and they will help me
Help, yes. I
Help
mean,
me.
you ultimately, as the prosecutor, need to own it and review it and certify it,
out,
but
meet my obligation.
But somebody can help you with that process, especially gathering the materials from the police departments and, outside agencies and ensuring that, we have all the materials we need to have. And so it's really been a process of systemizing it and making it a part of the culture and the fabric of the office. We have a fantastic chief who's, been very proactive in reaching out and making sure that ADAs contact him and make use of their resources. And it's very rewarding when I talk to prosecutors now who say, wow, this has really made a difference in my day-to-day life. And what that means is not just, oh, great, my prosecutor's feeling better, but it means that prosecutor can spend more time focused on the actual substance of a case and the victims and the families. Yeah, so that's been something I've noticed that was a difference and something that we really had to learn how to quickly deal with, because the reforms took place in 2019, but because of COVID, they really weren't felt until 2021, like real in their intensity. So that's been something just in the past year. Okay, here's a new issue that's prevalent in this office and at the state level, and we really need to figure out a way to deal with it. And I'm not saying we've solved the whole issue. I mean, there's still issues surrounding it, but I think we've at least given some kind of sort of relief to the overwhelmingness that it felt for a while.
One of the problems with being a district attorney or being anything in public life is budget. When you got in, did you feel your budget? I mean, every year you got to ask for a new budget. Is your budget? I'm sure it's never always completely adequate, but how are you doing with the budget? Are you satisfied with what you've been given so far? Are you way off? Do you need a lot more?
I mean, yes, like every elected official, we'll always say we want more. But, we deal with our Board of Legislators and our county executive, and they are very interactive and receptive, actually, and we have really substantive discussions around budget time. It's not just a yes, no, rubber stamp or veto. I would say we have gotten most of the things that we've requested. I think the county is growing. It's about 1 million people now, so our budget needs to grow a little bit, and we have been also trying to do more, so we have had to ask for more. And we have to justify that because, of course we should. But when you get outside the zone of, we're not just doing, okay, investigate, prosecute cases. We are also trying to do conviction integrity. We are also doing discovery reform. We are also trying to solve cold cases. We are also trying to do diversion. We are also trying to educate people in the county who need to know about red flag laws and cyber safety and keeping kids safe online. So we're doing more than a traditional prosecutor's office has done. And I think we need to make sure that we do a good enough job explaining to the people who control our budget or who oversee our budget why that is good for the county, why we're stepping into those roles, and so why we need more resources. And so we have done that, and we asked for more paralegals for discovery, for example. We were successful in asking for raises for our ADAs, which were very needed. I think if you look across the state, there have been quite a few. Every prosecutor's office has lost prosecutors over the past couple of years.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and so raises were necessary both to keep for retention purposes of keeping people who otherwise love their job but might need to have a little extra incentive and other than just cost of living, but also to keep us competitive with other offices who are now all competing over a smaller pool of people. So we were very grateful to get that funding for raises.
So you're going into your third year, right? You've done 2+ years. And I guess next year is an election year. I'm not going to ask you to declare on this show. It would be great, though. But assuming you want to continue, are there objectives, or besides just keeping things running, are there things that you haven't done yet that you want to do in the future?
I would say, we want to really develop now this misdemeanor mental health court. We got it started, but now it's a matter of developing and making sure that it's really running and being utilized. It's one thing to set it up and have an announcement, but to really get it utilized and working, and the services and the partners that we'll need to provide the services is really, I think, critical
That's one
on that
objective for the
front.
future,
Yes. We're going to keep pushing forward and being really proactive on gun violence. And, I haven't even touched on, but we've spent a lot of time on sex crimes and our Special Prosecutions Division and domestic violence. I mean, that's a huge issue in the county, domestic violence, and something that we're constantly, I mean, literally in the midst of kind of restructuring always internally how to make sure that we are as efficient as possible in how to service domestic violence victims, because that is part of the very voluminous part of our office. So that's continues and will continue to be a huge focus. And then I would say the hate crimes, we've done a lot of work also in the hate crimes space. I appointed a coordinator who's amazing and has been incredibly proactive in, again, working with our law enforcement partners. We sent an investigator to the FBI task force, Joint Terrorism Task Force, to make sure that we had that line of communication. And we've now just set up a portal with the county on the hate crimes portal, it's called. It's going to be used for other things, but for right now, the idea is to have a central location where all hate crimes across the county are collected and reported, so that we can better understand and have a picture of what's going on, because this isn't something we can just sort of say, oh yeah, it's happening out there. It's happening here too. And we don't want to overstate the problem, but we don't want to understate it. So this is going to be a really great tool to allow us to be even more proactive in our approach to those issues, which are very scary for people, obviously.
Has the crime level in Westchester, you see any differences? Is it going up, going down? I mean, there are more people, so when you have more people, you're going to have some more crime. But percentage-wise, do you feel things are getting worse or better?
I mean, I think the numbers, I don't have the latest numbers here, but, have shown that, I mean, I think everywhere there were rises in certain categories of crime, but not in others. And so while it may have felt to people like, the number of homicides was up, it wasn't, but maybe the number of property-based crimes was. It also depends what part of the county you're talking about, right? Because it's very different. And each police department keeps track of their own. So another goal we have is to try to be, we're constantly trying to improve on the data front here, and being able to collect data and have real numbers, so we can answer the question with real data and not just sort of how it feels and looks. But I would say, one thing I can say with confidence is, to the extent anything has gone up, it has not gone up in Westchester in the way that it has in other parts of the state, either in the city or the northern part of the state.
I was in court the other day talking to a assistant district attorney, and she told me the reason why she came here was because of you. And we were very, very lucky in Westchester to have somebody as brilliant, as dedicated, and on top of things as District Attorney Rocah. And it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. Hope to have you another time.
Absolutely.
In a couple years. Hopefully get your dog involved next time.
Exactly.
And so please understand that if you're in Westchester, you're safe, you're in good hands, and we're very lucky, and we should appreciate her hard work. This is Jim Martorano from All About Town saying good night and thank you for watching.